Infinity N5 is probably my favorite skirmish game of all time now. And I think it will be sort of my main skirmish game moving forward, probably for years to come. I obviously have made a couple of skirmish game videos in the past. You know, I talked about my love of Marvel Crisis Protocol, which I still absolutely love. I've talked about Trench Crusade. If you've listened to those videos, you'll also have heard me talk about I was a long-time Warhammer Kill Team player through first edition as well as second edition. And you know, I've played also cooperative skirmish games. Also, I do have a lot of skirmish game experience, but I've recently played Infinity N5. I finally have been able to get some games in, and it's safe to say it is going to be my main skirmish game moving forward. Alongside Trench Crusade, because Trench Crusade is sort of the nice sort of beer and pretzels, very narrative, very casual, whereas this game is a lot more competitive, it's a lot crunchier, but we'll get into the reasons why I love this game in a bit, but this game is also still fairly, I guess, almost narrative in a way and very flavorful. So this combines sort of the best of both worlds for me personally, and I can still approach it fairly casually and still really enjoy this game, which is great. Now, if you are someone like me and you've heard about Infinity, you've seen Infinity, you've tried to maybe even get into Infinity and just opened up the rule book and said, nope, this is not for me, this video is probably going to be for you, and hopefully I can sway you in taking the dive, because I assure you, taking the dive into Infinity N5, if you've been on the fence, is 110% worth it. I do have some reasons on my phone that I'll go into sort of why I really, really love this game, but if you don't know what Infinity is, it's currently on its 5th edition that it's recently launched, I believe just a few months ago, going from Infinity N4 to Infinity N5. This is a very long-running game developed by Corvus Belli, and this is its 5th edition that it's been in the running. I think the first edition came out in 2005, so this has been about 20 years in the making, and they've just been redefining the rules and refining things, not only in rules and mechanics, but in how they approach their models, how they approach the new player experience, and it's been an absolute blast. This is a game set in a cyberpunk near future universe. It is centered around what is called the human sphere, which is sort of obviously humanity, and where it's been broken up into multiple nations, things like that. It's very cyberpunk with a sort of an anime aesthetic almost, where everything is just oozing flavor and oozing sort of the rule of cool is the best way I can explain this game. We'll of course talk about specifics in a bit, but like this game is just chef's kiss in terms of how cool it is and how much the rules actually reflect how flavorful and cool it is. I mean, it's one of those games where I think if you have been in the skirmish space, you've probably seen Infinity models, whether it be like on subreddits for miniature painting, things like that, or maybe you were just interested in the game and you looked at the different model lineups and just it probably blew your mind on how cool the models are, because this game has tons and tons of different models in tons of different factions, but that's sort of what you get when you have a long-running game like this that's sort of built upon itself and has just such an extremely strong foundation, I think, and that is sort of what you get with this game. It is going to be quite difficult to talk about this game in terms of depth and sort of all the nitty-gritty details because A, I'm sort of still a fairly new player, and B, this can be an extremely overwhelming game, an intimidating game, but I do want to make this video to share with you just it's not as intimidating as I think people think it is. Now, obviously, it comes with the caveat that, again, I have quite a bit of skirmish game experience. I was able to pick this game up in a couple of games. I did not need to go through the quick start rules, for example. I was able to dive into sort of a full game fairly quickly. That is not going to be the case. It obviously also depends on your local scene. I had my local skirmish group introduce me into this game and teach me this game, and they were obviously very experienced themselves. But this game, because of how long running it is as well, this has a very, very strong community, and especially through things like Discord, subreddits, the amount of resources you have available to you are really, really solid in learning this game yourself. If you are someone who is able to play more complex board games or has just even one other skirmish game under your belt, you can pick up this game with relative ease. So now let's just talk about sort of why I love this game. And maybe it'll be able to I'll be able to explain easier of why this game is not as intimidating or as scary as I think a lot of people think it is. And I, of course, was of that mind as well. Like, I actually tried getting into this game in 4th edition in Infinity N4 last year. I actually purchased some models. I was gonna try to get my friends to do it, but after I saw the reaction to Kill Team, which had its own issues, even that game sort of overwhelmed them. This game, when I talked about it, they were also quite overwhelmed. So I put it off to the side. I wasn't able to play it myself. I sold off my models, and then come this year, I joined a skirmish group when we're playing Trench Crusade. I learned that they play Infinity, and I learned that one of the guys is actually the guy that I sold my models to, which is hilarious. So I actually ended up getting some of my models back. I was able to buy them back from him with a heavy discount because he knew that I wanted to get into Infinity, which is super generous of them. All these models, and I have some extra models as well, I was able to purchase from one of the local guys also for a very heavy discount. And yeah, I'm very, very glad I'm actually able to finally play this game. So I thought it was quite overwhelming too when I was trying to look into N4. And you know, I was probably like many people, opened up the rule book that's almost 200 pages, saw how many different skills there were for all the different models, and I was like, oh, this is a little bit too much for me. And I closed the book and I sort of walked away as well. But once, you know, now that I've started playing the game, and especially going through the quick start rules, again, they've sort of redefined sort of how to approach the game. They have a fantastic quick start rule book where you essentially just have 3 models each. It's just simply learning how the basic order and activation system works, because this game has an extremely unique activation system, and sort of just general game flow, to be honest. I mean, this game is unique in general. Like, this game is one of a kind in terms of skirmish games. There's a lot of parallels you can make with other skirmish games when it comes to like turn activations, skills, things like that, dice rolls. This game sort of breaks the mold, in my opinion, and it really approaches things in a unique way. And that sort of is partly due to how many skills there are in this game. Even though it is quite overwhelming, you can sort of break down the general game flow. You know, 90% of the time, you're gonna be just moving and shooting. And because of all the different rules and skills in this game, that is sort of where the 5% or 10%, 5%, whatever, craziness comes from, is because there's quite a few different interactions that can potentially happen when you mix all those individual rules and stuff like that in that moment. But for the most part, just basic moving, shooting, dodging, which is what you're gonna be doing like 90% of the time, it really isn't that hard to wrap your head around. It's no more difficult than in Kill Team or something like that, moving a model and shooting a model in that game. But this game also lets you just sort of progressively add on things fairly easily. They have a very good new player flow of what you should buy into. They have like an essentials box that gives you a very, very basic thing, which like the quick start rules and stuff like that. Then you have like operation boxes, or like the larger starter box set, which sort of increases that, gives you a little bit more terrain, a little bit more advanced rules that you can use. And then you can go from there, and they have even boxes that you can add, like essentially booster boxes you can add on to certain factions, things like that, or large action packs for the factions where it'll kickstart your army at about a 200 to 250 point value, where like 300 points is the standard that people play at nowadays. But they get, you know, it's very easy to figure out where you should go next, and it's sort of a step-by-step process in getting into this game. And the same goes for just learning the rules, where that quick start rules just lets you learn how to move a model, shoot with a model, dodge with a model. And again, I played with my girlfriend, and she was able to pick up on that as well, and she was able to move models, shoot with models, and she's never even played a skirmish game before. And then from there, you can just slowly add models. You can slowly add models with specific skills that you're going to see most commonly in the game, like camouflage, for example. And then you can just slowly go from there. So even though it is very overwhelming, it's only overwhelming if you just open the rule book and you just think you have to memorize every single thing in that rule book, which really you don't. Obviously, as you learn the game and you learn what faction you want to play with their own individual rules, you will need to learn certain things and memorize certain things. But that goes with any skirmish game. So honestly, it's not really any more difficult than learning other skirmish games, in my opinion. I think it's because it's such a unique game, and especially how the game flow works, is that's what makes it a little bit more difficult to learn, is because you really have to wrap your head around certain stuff. For example, there's no pre-measuring in this game. When I'm about to shoot a model, I have to eyeball, are we in a good range for me to shoot that model. And then after I declare my shot, then I can bring out the measuring tool and figure out how things are. So, but that also makes for some really, really great moments, and it adds another skill, a layer of skill expression to the game. And the skill expression and list building in this game provide just so much depth, and the amount of options you have for each army, while it is overwhelming and why it can be intimidating, it's really, as long as you can break it down to the bare basics first, like just reading a typical unit card, figuring out what the more common skills are that you see very commonly between different models like mimetism or camouflage, it gets a lot easier to sort of hone in and not get as overwhelmed, because anyone who opens the rule book is going to get overwhelmed if you haven't played the game before. Like, every single person is going to feel like that, but you have to realize as well that every single rule in the game is in that rule book. So it's not like Warhammer 40K, for example, where multiple rules are spread across multiple books and codexes. Everything that you need is in that rule book, but also the game just has such a fantastic official support when it comes to their own official wiki. They have their own official apps for army building that are like premium top tier. And again, there's just so many easy access ways to Google a question or figure out a rules question that there's always going to be an answer for that thing, because there are so many options available and everything is sort of laid out in that rule book. It accounts for all those different interactions. The best way that I can sort of equate it if you're playing tabletop role-playing games is between D&D and Pathfinder. You know, D&D is simpler, it's more accessible, but there, you know, it doesn't have a rule for every single interaction really. But at the same time, that proves for a lot of ambiguity. You know, a lot of players, including myself and my play group, we had to come up with our own house rules. We had to figure things out ourselves in certain things and just sort of go with our vibes and what would be best narratively maybe, or something like that. But there wasn't really always great answers for certain things. Whereas Pathfinder, it is a crunchier system. There are a lot more options to wrap your head around, which can be a little bit overwhelming, but there is a lot more concrete written things that you don't have to leave it up to ambiguity. You know what certain things are, and that amount of options, even though while it is more than D&D and it's a little bit more intimidating, it provides you with more options. And it just provides for a better combat experience, in my opinion. Obviously, it's just you know, it's just your preference at the end of the day. Obviously, this game isn't going to be for everyone, but if you're someone like me who does like a fairly crunchy system, you do like really cool models, you do like unique games, I mean, you're not going to find anything better, I think, than Infinity N5. And this might be just, like, you might just look at this video and be like, oh, this guy's just in his honeymoon period, he's only played a couple of games. But, I mean, with the amount of skirmish games that I've played and the amount of board games I've played, like, I know what I like. I know what feels good for me and my play styles and stuff like that. And Infinity N5 checks off every single box that I have that I want in a skirmish game. And we can go into some more of those reasons as well. Like, let's go over sort of how the order system and activation system works. This is probably the most unique aspect of Infinity N5. I'll just call it Infinity. N5 is just like the 5th edition of this game. We'll just say Infinity. You might look at a battle report or something like that. You might look at how many models you might need in an army and be a little bit overwhelmed, like, oh, you have 15 models on the board, which is, you know, fairly typical for a skirmish game, like 10 to 15 models, which is sort of what this game is. It might be overwhelming with the amount of rules that every model has and the amount of models on the board. It might be too overwhelming where it's like, oh, I have to figure out what I want to do with every single one of those models at every single point. Well, no. One thing I learned about this game is you typically build lists with like a few attack pieces. You'll have your defensive options or ARO options, which we'll get into in a second. You'll have specialists who are mainly used for just pushing buttons for objectives, things like that. But you might only be focusing on a few different models in your army for the most part. And that sort of comes down to how the order system works. These little tokens right here are orders. And how this game works is, let's say I have 15 models in my army that I bring to the table. When my turn happens, I generate 15 orders, one for each model that is alive and, you know, not unconscious or dead. Obviously, there are other types of orders. You can get past that, and there's like a whole other smorgasbord, but of course, we'll just stick to the basics. So I generate my 15 orders. In my army, I might only have a few models that I want to focus on to actually run through the city or run through the map and kill things, clear the way essentially for my mission objective people. So it might be like this big tag, which tags are sort of like the mechs in this game. It might be this crazy cool Karoshi rider who's on a motorcycle with a scythe. It might be this crazy Shikami who has super jump and double swords and can jump over buildings and things like that. You know, these three might be my only attack pieces. So I generate 15 orders at the start of my turn. I spend an order to activate one of my models. I can activate any model in my army, you know, for the most part. So let's say I want to activate this tag. I will activate him. I'll do his turn. We're not going to talk too specifics on things like that. Because obviously this is not going to be a learn to play exactly. But let's say I activate him. I do his activation. That's going to be one order out of that pool of 15. Well, normally in a normal skirmish game or other skirmish games, like Kill Team or whatever, it would be I activate a model and then you activate a model, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This game sort of throws that out of the window. It follows the idea of Warhammer 40K or, you know, bigger war games where it's I go do all my stuff and then you go and do all your stuff. Now you might be scared about that because that's one of the big issues I have with 40K, and I think one of the big issues many people have with 40K is it's very boring to just sort of sit there and watch all your opponent do all their stuff, watch all your models get blown off the table, and you just really can't do anything about it. This has AROs, or AROs, which are called automatic response orders, and that's sort of what makes this game really, really dynamic, and it really never feels like your turn is over. And I know that's sort of like a buzz line or a buzzword saying that, but it honestly really feels that way. Like I haven't really felt never engaged in the game because you still have to constantly think about AROs, essentially responses. So when I move this model, every activation is essentially split up into two different parts. When I move here, that's like the first half of my activation, and my second half will come after everyone checks to see if any model can see this model, or if you're too close to the model, they will get AROs or responses. So they get to actually activate and do something, where there'd be like shoot back at me, dodge, throw smoke, plenty of other different things you can do as a response. Only after I hear all the responses of those models, only then do I do my second half of my order, and then I can choose what to do after hearing how everyone responds to me. So if everyone's dodging, for example, I might just continue moving on because no one's shooting at me. Or if someone shoots back at me, maybe I do want to shoot back at them. Those are the things that I can decide. And essentially once all of that is over, that will be this model's activation done. But you can sort of see how the combat never ends, because the opposing player who's on the reactive turn, they always have to constantly be thinking about, okay, who do I want to shoot back with? Do I want to dodge with this person? Is this person in danger? Things like that. Now, when it comes to I activate all my stuff, again, because I activated this model, he's not done for the turn. I have 14 orders left. I could spend another order and I can activate the same model again, and I can do this as many times as I want to. And that's sort of the really, really unique thing about this game, and what makes it super, super cool when you have really, really cool models in this game. Because it really, really is unfortunate when you play games like Kill Team, where you do have cool models in that game, they get to do something, maybe you push up the board too much, and your opposing player gets to do something and they just shoot that model off the board, and that model can't do anything cool for the rest of the game. Obviously that can happen in this game. Like, I could move a model, someone's response might be to shoot that model, and that model could still die on my turn. That can obviously happen, but when you have pieces in this game that are focused on attacking, and that's sort of what they're meant to do, well, I'll have this tag activate, he'll go around a corner, he'll shoot a guy, I'll spend another order, he'll jump on top of a building, shoot another guy, I'll spend another order, he might like run into melee, crush a guy with his gigantic sword, and you can have models rampaging through the battlefield, and it's really, really cool, it's really, really dynamic, and it might seem like a model is just walking through stuff and blowing things off the board, which, obviously can't happen at the end of the day, it's still a dice game, but you still build your army with defensive pieces in mind, and with that reaction system, there is still a lot of decision making on like how risky it is. Is it to move this model into open fire where everyone gets to react to him potentially? It's very much promotes like sneaking around, like stealth is a huge part of this game, and that of course we could probably make a whole video just purely talking about how stealth works and like how the hidden information in this game works. Because yeah, this game has a really, really unique order system and activation system, but also with how cool the models are with their individual skills, it provides for an extremely, extremely thematic experience. Like, this game is the epitome of the rule of cool turned up to 11. Again, it's sort of that manga and anime influence, obviously, to the game as well, where it's sort of a little bit over the top, but with the amount of options you have in this game, it just promotes that, essentially. Like, let's talk about some of the cool stuff you can do. So one of the cool things my models have in this Oban list is this Shinobi Kitsune. I tried to remember the name here. The Shinobu Kitsune. She has the ability Infiltration. She also has an ability called Hidden Deployment. Now, this game, it has what is called open information and also hidden information. There's a lot of hidden information in this game. And this might be the sort of make it or break it for some people, but this also is just super cool. It's super thematic because it's set in a cyberpunk universe. People have holograms, people have camo technology, but this person has hidden deployment, which means when I walk up to a table, let's say I'm playing in a tournament, you do hand your courtesy list over. And the courtesy lists out all the open information about your army. But anything hidden, like this model, I can leave off that list. So I can deploy my army. This has hidden deployment. I can then place that model. I would essentially tell my opponent to either walk away from the table for a second or turn around. I would then place this model down. I would take a picture of it. I would then take that model off the board, and only when I activate that model and want to reveal that model, either through a reaction or during my turn, my opponent has no clue that model exists on the board, which is super cool. So this model also has Infiltration, which I actually get to do a roll at the start of the game. And if I do succeed at the roll, which I did in my game today, is I can place this model in my opponent's side of the board. Now, it was super funny because my opponent had a forward deployment model, so he could actually deploy 4 inches past his deployment zone. Even though I can deploy on my opponent's half of the board, normally with Infiltration, you cannot deploy in your opponent's deployment zone. But because my model deployed something out of his deployment zone, I was actually able to place this model literally right up beside the other model without him knowing. When he activated that model, I responded and I dodged into him to get into melee and essentially cut him up from there and essentially assassinated him in the first turn, which was super, super satisfying and super, super cool. And that's just one of the many, many crazy things that can happen in this game with the hidden information. Because you also have things like camo tokens, where this model right here is able to place down mines and also hide himself as a decoy. So he can place, and he also has camouflage. So I might be able to place down 3 camo tokens. My opponent has no clue what these are. You can do a skill to try and discover something, but from the get-go, my opponent has to essentially guess which one is the real model, which one is the decoy, and which one is his shock mine. So it's like a turtle game almost, and there's a lot of mind games, there's a lot of just crazy high level play when you get into shenanigans. My friend was telling me about one of his lists that he built, or one of the lists that he saw someone else play, I think, in a tournament, where when you pass over the courtesy list, there was only like 3 models listed on the courtesy list. Everything else was either camoed, had like impersonation abilities or whatever, like that. It's just crazy on the things that you can do. And that, again, sort of goes along with just sort of how many skills there are. While it may add to its complexity or depth, it also adds to the amount of options and cool things you can do in this game. Like, the game just has crazy thematic models in terms of movement. Like, this model has super jump. So I was able to like jump up a building or jump towards an objective, hit the objective, continue my movement off the objective with a super jump and land on a building. And I could go on and on the amount of cool things you can do in this game with the amount of skills that are listed in this game. And it's just super, super thematic, where a lot of the flavor of certain factions is reflected in the rules. So for example, like Ariadna has like, they don't really have any hacking capabilities, but they have werewolves. Like, they have guys that can actually, when they get hit or something like that, they can turn into werewolf form, rampage through, and they have like a lot of different ways to get around in stealth. You have certain factions which are extremely good at hacking and counter hacking and things like that. You have factions that are good at having heavy infantry, you know, just crazy good models with high armor. You have models like mine, Oban, who's very good and like extremely specialized in close quarters combat. And yeah, I could go on and on. So yeah, this game also uses, if you want to learn more about sort of how the game works, this game uses D20s, which is a very, very unique dice system to use. Obviously, it might seem like there's a lot of variance in the game, but that goes with any dice game, to be honest, because of how many different modifiers are in this game. There's a lot of ways to even things out and make things go in your favor or against your opponent's favor. So the D20s actually aren't as intimidating or as scary as I thought they would be. And just like in D&D, it is so satisfying landing crits in this game. Essentially, whenever you get on exactly on the target number that you're trying to meet or roll below, because again, this game is a little bit different, where you are actually trying to meet or roll below your target number. And when it comes to rolling against your opponent, it's sort of a mix of, you want to roll higher than what your opponent rolls, but lower than your target number, because you can actually cancel out what your opponent does when it comes to face-to-face rolls. But on target numbers, if I roll exactly what I need to on the dice, that is going to be a critical. But also like melee, for example, with how deadly this game is, you can actually have melee skill, like melee attributes, go past 20. So if my model here has a CC or a close combat score of 23, well, I crit on a 20. I can never miss, first of all. I crit on a 20, and I also crit on a 1, 2, or 3. And it sort of goes from there. So it really, really makes close quarters combat super cool. Close quarters combat is fairly, like, I wouldn't say rare in this game, but it shouldn't be something that you really focus on in this game. Ranged is still king in this game. But I have a faction that specializes in close quarters combat. So if there are times where I am able to get into close combat, I do want to do that, and I typically do just tear things up with how good my models are in CC. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for just my splurge by this game. I think I've talked about sort of hopefully enough to sort of sway you and sort of introduce this game to maybe some new people who haven't heard of this game before, but are still into skirmish games and maybe want to learn a new one. But this game, honestly, if you're like a tabletop role-playing game player, I think this game also might be for you, just because of how much depth this game has. I felt a lot of, like when I was building my army lists for a specific mission, it feels like building a character in D&D or tabletop role-playing games. And if you're someone who does play tabletop role-playing games, you'll know how satisfying and how cool that is and how much fun that is. Like, you can build so many different lists. Actually, one thing I will talk about is, because of how many models there are in this game, the Corvus Belli, the developer, is very, very proxy friendly. The community and the developer themselves, they definitely encourage people to proxy their models. The nice thing about this game is everything's standardized fairly well. Again, there's like a rule for everything, so there's no ambiguity. That's one of the biggest issues when it comes to skirmish games, is line of sight. Well, usually you'll do true line of sight, where if I see a little bit of tiny tip of your sword, I get to see that model, which really, really sucks. So this game has silhouettes where you actually have standardized measurements for each silhouette, for each different type of silhouette. And so you actually can place a silhouette behind a model. You'll know exactly if something has line of sight, regardless of swords or weird things sticking out, which is great. But in addition to that, because a lot of the models are also fairly similar in sort of what they look like, for example, these two people are just peoples with guns, even though two of them may be technically different units, you can proxy anything that is the same base size and the same silhouette. So even though they might be different, I could play these in the game as the same model if I wanted to. So there's a ton of ways to proxy stuff, and because the models and sculpts are so freaking cool in this game, it does let you have some freedom as well in choosing your favorite looking models and being able to use those for the most part. Obviously, I can't proxy this tag as like a human with a gun, but there are still a lot of cool things you can do with the different proxies and sort of how you want to sculpt things, which is really, really solid. But yeah, that is gonna do it for my rant and raving about Infinity N5. You'll probably see me check out other Skirmish games here and there. I'll probably still love new Skirmish games as they come across my plate, but I can safely say that Infinity N5 is going to be my main game moving forward, and it's definitely, like, I think, the Skirmish game that I've had the most fun with from top to bottom. Hopefully this video helped you decide whether or not you can maybe give this game a try yourself. I would definitely recommend checking out, again, the rules are free online. I definitely wouldn't recommend just going to the main rule book and figuring that stuff out. Definitely start with the quick start rules on the website. You could just use any models you have lying around, and you could easily find someone else to play a 3 model versus 3 model quick start game. I assure you, it's not as scary as it looks. You will be able to learn this game and play it. And then from there, you can sort of expand and dig deeper and figure out where you want to begin and continue your Infinity N5 journey. And you know, speaking of new games, my next video will actually be a sponsored video. Might not come out for a little while, but I am in talks with doing a sponsored video for a new Skirmish game coming up, which is being developed by Andy Chambers, which is sort of a titan in the tabletop games industry. So I'm very, very excited about that one, and from the rules of that one, I'm definitely going to enjoy playing that one as well. But I think Infinity N5 is my all-time favorite Skirmish game from here on out. And I'm just gonna continue. I'll probably make some more videos on Infinity N5, to be honest, because I do want to just get more word about this game out there. Again, that's essentially what this channel is for. It's for me to share my favorite things about board games and tabletop games. I will be doing some more board game stuff, don't worry. I know my last few videos have been just mainly around Skirmish games, but I do want to do probably a overall thoughts video on the King's Dilemma, because my friends and I just finished the campaign for the King's Dilemma, and we of course have Kingdoms Forlorn coming up too, which I'll definitely be doing some more videos on also. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I know it was just sort of all over the place, but this is one of those games where just so much to, you know, splurge about and rant and rave about. There's a lot to this game. I barely scratched the surface for you in terms of what is possible with this game. So I definitely urge you to check out the quick start rules, dive into sort of some battle reports and some cool videos from other content creators, and hopefully you can fall in love with this game as I have as well. But until next time, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.